It may only last half the time of the Le Mans 24 hours, but that's perhaps because if Sebring did last that amount of time, then no cars would have finished. This is one of the most brutal racetracks on cars and drivers, with a long history of tearing racing vehicle components to shreds. Nowadays, it's not quite as common to see mechanical failures at this race, thanks to the almost bulletproof reliability of modern race cars, but it does still provide a stern test for any driver who participates on this track. Multiple different manufacturers and cars have taken on this fearsome event, but one company made what I feel is a rather forgotten one-off splash at this event 21 years ago. Despite competing with the car, they would end up winning Le Mans overall. It's 2003 and an outstanding entry of 55 cars would be taking part in this great race, and it would be a debut run at Sebring for the amazing Bentley Speed 8. The Bentley team decided that it was worth going to do the famous 12-hour event because teams that did well at Sebring would usually do well at Le Mans, which for them was their main target. The team would end up competing in the LMGTP class for this race, albeit one of the two Bentleys would certainly win that class because they were the only two cars running in that category. That didn't at all mean though that they weren't in with a clear chance of securing victory overall either, as the LMP 900 class were also similar on pace to the Bentley LMGTPs. Or rather, I should say the iconic Audi R8s were similar on pace to the Bentleys. The Speed 8s would end up being the fastest cars in the build-up to this race, and would qualify on pole position thanks to Johnny Herbert. Or at least, that's what they thought would have happened, as when it came to race day, both cars would be pretty much at the back of the grid due to a technical infraction. On pole therefore would be the number 1 Audi R8 driven by Frank Biela, Marco Werner and Philip Peter. And they would lead the field to green on a murky and cloudy day at Sebring. And probably unsurprisingly, the Audis would start to pull away from almost everyone else. For the Bentleys, it was time to get through all of the traffic. Dozens of different GT cars slowing their rate of progress down, including this Spiker C8. Although, as the Bentleys went by it, notice how it had this off-track excursion exiting turn 5, which wasn't picked up by the camera all that clearly. It did carry on, but would ultimately retire from the race, having completed 103 laps. This Dyson Racing MG Lola would be the first to suffer a mechanical issue. The then comfortable leader in the LMP 675 class, and actually not too far off pace-wise from the Audis, would suffer a loss of power steering, therefore ruling it out of a class victory. And on a circuit like Sebring, no power steering would be an absolute nightmare. Barely a quarter of an hour into the race, and we get our first retirement. And no, your eyes do not deceive you, that is a Pagani Zonda. Or Pagani Zonda, as this graphic says, which I guess, seeing as they were out, was possibly rather apt. Competing in the GTS class, where the Corvettes and Ferrari 550s were racing, the Car Sport America entry would retire with what was initially thought to be a gearbox gremlin, but would later be diagnosed as an issue with the Mercedes-derived V12 engine. The Audis were increasing their lead, but that didn't stop the champion racing entry of Emanuele Pirro having a sketchy moment entering the pits, trying not to hit the back of a Saleen S7, taking an orange Conalon for a short ride on its front splitter. Now for a brief moment of TVR Tuscan appreciation. Okay, with that completed, the race for the next couple of hours would go by without any cautions, but didn't stop an enormous array of mechanical problems occurring for a number of cars, with several teams retiring for one reason or another. With that being said, however, at this point it didn't seem to affect any of the overall victory contenders. That was until this moment for one of the Bentleys. As they were negotiating traffic, the number 7 entry of Guy Smith got into contact with the spinning Cycle Motorsport GT class Porsche. The Bentley would enter the pits with the front bodywork being removed during service, thus costing it valuable time to the Audis. Several more incidents and failures would plague the race, yet at the same time none of these would result in a full course caution yet. Perhaps the most terrifying incident of them so far involving the LMP 900 car of Jim Matthews, with this GT class BMW taking avoiding action. Mika Salo in one of the Audis had this collision coming up to turn 1 with the Riley and Scott Mark III LMP 900 car from American Spirit Racing, which thankfully didn't result in something much worse. At the same time, Salo would end up having an intense battle for 4th place with Tom Christensen, who in this race was actually driving for Bentley. The Bentleys though weren't done with the collisions either, but again this wouldn't amount to anything race damaging. Night was setting in, but issues were also setting in for one of the main contenders in the Audi Sport UK entry. After sustaining the contact earlier, the number 9 would lose several laps with a problem for the clutch. whilst for the other Audis it was completely serene running up at the front, with no let up in their speed whatsoever. That was until the race had under 3 hours to go, when the first, and as it would later turn out to be, only caution of the race would be thrown. This would be due to a large crash at the final corner for the number 34 Risi Competizione Ferrari 360 GT entry, driven at the time by Kevin McGarrity. There isn't any footage of the crash, but apparently the Ferrari had got in contact from another car, lost the rear end, and whilst Kevin did correct the slide, he ran out of road and hit the wall, with the impact trapping his injured feet around the pedals. With the car also catching fire, he was in a rush to get out of the Ferrari, and whilst he did do that, he was in a lot of discomfort. He was taken to hospital, but was hoping to get back into a fit enough state to drive in between 4 to 6 weeks. 2 hours and 16 minutes remaining and the race resumed again, with Emanuele Pirro leading in the champion racing Audi over the number 1 Infineon Team Jost run R8 in second. But the champion racing Audi would come into the pits with Pirro suffering calf cramps. The pit stop of the team cost them the lead to the number 1 Audi. In the lead of another class though in GTS was the number 4 Corvette, until its gearbox went with just under 2 hours remaining. At this point though, the number of cars still running in the 9-vehicle GTS class was dwindling, which meant that despite retiring now, the Corvette could still have kept a podium, especially as the Carsport America Dodge Viper, yes this is the same team that ran the Zonda you saw earlier, had this off and clouted the wall. The suspension was damaged, and in all likelihood probably should have meant that the car was retired and pulled off to the side of the road. However, a podium in GTS was calling, and if the car could get round to the pits, as well as complete another 7 or so laps, then it would earn that podium. As it was very gradually making its way back, the 78 GT class Porsche from T2M Motorsport had this spin at the hairpin. It had a rear left puncture, and would have another spin at the exact same spot as where the Viper was positioned. I think at this point all the drivers and teams just wanted to go home. With a remarkable amount of patience and determination, as well as the car wanted to go into some rather sketchy places, Jeff Altenberg was able to eventually get round to the pits after doing a lap of Sebring in around 16 minutes. The pit crew got to work and made a repair on that broken suspension component, and sent the car back out with 21 minutes remaining. Certainly enough time to complete the required laps necessary for a glorious podium. Except when they got back out, the car still wasn't quite right. I mean, as you can quite clearly see, it's considerably better than it was, but not as it should be. The clutch wasn't working properly, which, given what happened to it earlier, is perhaps not surprising. The pace was reduced, and the laps were ticking by slowly, but could they still overtake the stricken number 4 Corvette for a GTS podium? No, a small fire under the chassis with around 7 minutes remaining will put the Carsport Viper out of the race and remain 4th in class. Okay, I think on that particular note, we'll just cut to the chase. The race was won overall by the number 1 Infineon Team Jost Audi R8 of Marco Werner, Philipp Pieter and Frank Bieler. The Bentleys, which were initially meant to be the highlight of this video until the Viper came along, would get 3rd and 4th overall, with them also taking honours in the LMGTB class, what a shock that is, thanks to the number 8 entry of Johnny Herbert, Mark Blundell and David Brabham. The number 3 Corvette won GTS, the 23 Alex Job Racing Porsche won GT, and the number 20 Dyson Racing MG Lola won in LMP 675. But to be honest, I think you know which entry took the unexpected spotlight in this video. Yeah, with that being said, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, then I'd be enormously appreciative if you did hit the like and subscribe buttons. However, until the next video, be kind to each other and enjoy the rest of your day.